Welcome to Intuitive Astrology with Molly McCord. Thank you so much for joining me today as we're going to discuss the Mercury Retrograde in Cancer energies that begin on June 29th and continue until July 23rd. So we close out the month of June with Mercury stationing retrograde at 26 degrees of Cancer and traveling back to 16 degrees of Cancer until July 23rd. We're going to be discussing the astrological energies, of course, and specifics of this Mercury retrograde, but then I'm also going to be diving into more of the intuitive messages and layers of energies I'm feeling around this particular Mercury retrograde, which I hope supports you in navigating through Mercury swimming backwards in the first water sign of Cancer. So as Mercury stations retrograde at 26 degrees of Cancer, Mercury will be right behind Jupiter. Jupiter now in his final days in Cancer before entering into Leo on June 30th or July 1st, depending on your location. So Mercury the messenger has been traveling behind the exuberant, happy influences of Jupiter in Cancer, which has been bringing to your attention what you're learning about your personal needs, your emotional world, your connection style, your attachment style, how you move through your emotions, what you're learning about your own unconscious patterns and habits that perhaps have been a part of your world and defining your emotional well-being. Jupiter ultimately wants us to learn and grow from the wisdom we've obtained, and Jupiter does that by providing us with lived experiences to personally reference. And Jupiter in Cancer has been bringing our attention to previous life events, previous connections, previous experiences, perhaps taking you back into childhood memories or previous chapters in your life so that you can learn and grow from not only those experiences, but that version of yourself. And so there can be a lot of joy and even a peaceful, calming influence that Jupiter offers as he completes his journey through Cancer, where now you're more connected to your heart, your emotional needs, what supports you, especially at a base level energy, what you need to feel strong in yourself, and how you're learning to trust who you are and your needs even more. Well, here comes this Mercury retrograde, now covering that territory that Jupiter has been in for over a year. Jupiter first entered Cancer back on June 9th, 2025. But Mercury is going to be covering the territory and themes in your chart that this Jupiter has been moving through since last November, 2025. So in your chart, you would identify where you have 16 to 26 degrees of Cancer, as this is where Jupiter has been, but now Mercury is coming through here. And what Mercury is going to be giving you is an opportunity to rewrite certain stories, personal understandings, and emotional truths that you're realizing contain more personal wisdom for you. Now, Cancer is the first water sign of the zodiac, and it's associated with your personal emotional world. It's what you feel internally that is private or hidden, that is part of how you process and move through what you're picking up on in an environment. It also pertains to what you've been holding in your emotional container that has left an imprint of some kind. And because of this imprint, the Cancer energy can take you into the past. It brings you back into those previous cycles, nostalgia, memories, even previous lifetimes that emotionally affected you. Of course, this can be wonderful energy. This can be those experiences that were peaceful, trusting, uplifting. These could be the energies that gave you a new understanding of hearing your emotions and what you're really feeling without avoiding them, without pushing them away, rejecting them, or diminishing them. The Cancer energy in its healthiest form is where you're able to honor everything you're feeling in your own personal container and work with it intentionally and responsibly. And this is where it's important to have a way to communicate and essentially let people know when you need that personal space, when it's yours to manage or process or sit with, when what you're feeling and sensing is more about a message to you more than to anyone else. And so this means that the Mercury retrograde in Cancer is going to support you in seeing more of what you need on a daily basis that is healthy and good for your internal world, that allows you to also establish necessary boundaries around your personal container and your emotional space, to know what is yours to work through and what is not, meaning to look at what you have absorbed or taken on, what you have been holding and carrying that you're maybe seeing in a new way during this particular Mercury retrograde, and understanding this is not mine. I don't need to feel this or hold this. In fact, what I'm learning is about what were my intentions here in this interaction or in this energetic exchange. And that's important because the Cancer energy, again, can be very unconscious. And if you are an empath, if you are highly intuitive and you feel energy and you pick up on energy, this particular Mercury retrograde is going to ask you to be clear in what you're willing to do differently because of what you've learned about yourself over the past year, but especially since last November. And so you could have some new insights that finally feel like they're strengthening and coming alive within you. And with the Cancer energy, these could even be insights that are returning to you that you've already felt before, meaning it's Mercury the messenger returning you to something that you already knew, you already understood about yourself, your well-being, your personal needs. And now there could be a sense of, I'm ready to change this at a core level of my being. I'm willing to do this differently, and I'm willing to honor more of what I need with greater strength and responsibility. And so this is going to be a period of time when you're essentially learning more about who you are and what you need that maybe you've already seen at a more expanded level. That is how Jupiter works, right? And since Jupiter has been here in your chart, amplifying how you feel, bringing something to your awareness so that you can learn and grow from it, Mercury is now following suit and requiring a mental shift so that what you are communicating and understanding about yourself aligns with a new belief system. And that new belief system is aligned with Jupiter and is meant to make you feel good about who you are, the way you process feelings and emotions, perhaps what you pick up on through your sensitivity or your hyper awareness, which can be a Cancer strength. Perhaps you're learning how to manage any of your highly sensitive person energies. Maybe you're seeing more about how you handle your emotions and your needs and how you communicate them. And that's important because Cancer energy will hold things in. It's part of that container energy where it feels safest to keep it inside, or you might want the privacy or the protection of keeping something to yourself. But ultimately, that Cancer energy wants to feel safe enough to open up, to share, to express, and to be honest about what you're feeling and what you need, but to do so from a place of maturity and responsibility. And that is one of the things that this Jupiter in Cancer has been guiding us through. And again, now Mercury retrograde in Cancer is asking you to apply it to your mindset, to be ready to communicate in a new way what you're feeling, allow it to reflect what you've learned about yourself. This could be useful in referencing perhaps previous life experiences or things you've learned along the way, maybe even sharing things that you have felt in previous experiences or situations, and allowing that to be a reference point for your own growth and how you're now doing something in a brand new way. And so ultimately, this is a very personal Mercury retrograde in Cancer. You might feel that you're processing more, you're applying new skills, you're learning more about what you want to communicate, say, or express, because that's what that Mercury also urges us to do, is to ensure that the heart chakra is connected to the throat chakra. But this could be a retrograde where it might be difficult to find the right words at times, when what you're feeling is quite expressive or quite emotional, and maybe you don't want that to come across. Maybe that's not appropriate in certain professional environments or in certain relationships. But there's something here about refining it so that you're not cutting off the heart. You're not shutting down what you're feeling. But there could be this interesting back and forth. Like I'm seeing the energy move up and down between the heart chakra to the throat chakra, where the energy comes on full force and then it needs to regulate, and then you're trying to moderate it, and then you're trying to temper it, but you know you want to move it and get it out. And so this is going to be a very interesting time for our emotional moderation and ensuring that it's not staying trapped. Because part of what we're learning with a Mercury retrograde in Cancer is how to feel strong and confident being in our heart space and expressing what we're feeling, what we're thinking, without being too defensive, too overprotective, or hypersensitive. And so I'm feeling like this could be an energy that is felt in the vocal cords, almost like you have to practice saying something, or it helps to write it out first, or you might find that you need more time to compose your thoughts or understand what is essential to say, present, speak, or communicate. And so give yourself more time during this Mercury retrograde in Cancer. Allow yourself time to connect with your heart and your feelings to ensure that that is a grounded, strong energy that you're aware of. But then part of this Mercury retrograde is teaching you how to do something new and different. And that's because Mercury is connected to not only learning, teaching, and studying, but how we continue to do so throughout our lives, how we allow ourselves to keep growing and to have new skills we develop that reflect where we're at in life and what we've learned along the way. Now, at a more practical level, Mercury retrograde in Cancer can bring up matters from the past for you to reevaluate, review, and reconsider. This can be people that represent a past area of your life, past relationships, anything from your family or childhood memories can also come alive with this strong Cancer energy. You could be pulled back into your hometown, for example, or visit a place you used to frequent when you were younger, and of course see it in new ways and with fresh eyes, sort of like returning to a grade school or elementary school and realizing how small everything is. Like the desks are small, the chairs are small, but when you went to that school, everything seems so big. So part of this is revisiting a previous energy energy field and seeing it in a new way. And I feel that part of what Mercury retrograde in Cancer invites us to do is to have greater compassion, empathy, and love for where we have come from, for previous cycles, previous experiences. And this can also directly relate to family matters, since Cancer is about your immediate nuclear family, where you were raised, where you grew up, and could even be showing you more about who you were or what mattered to you at that time in your life. Now, this doesn't mean it's a literal trip back in time. Also, with this energy, you could be transported back to previous lifetimes or previous timelines that hold Cancer themes. So you could have some visions or connections to a village you used to live in, or to a family dynamic that you grew up in another lifetime. This can certainly bring up themes around your lineage, ancestors, and genealogy. This also relates directly to the matriarchal energies, to the matriarchal DNA strand and lineage that has been passed down through generations, especially through the womb, since Cancer rules the womb, the breasts, the uterus, soft tissue in the body, those places that also can feel quite sensitive and vulnerable. And so this could be a time when you are revisiting themes and patterns that your mother or your mother's family have experienced, and you're also holding an energetic cord to those energies. This could be quite insightful. Again, this could also be something you've already been working through since Jupiter has been in Cancer. But now this Mercury retrograde is going to reveal new information, new details, new stories that were previously hidden, and it's going to be made more personal. And so there could be something in your family lineage that makes its way to you for you to understand. And maybe you feel it's time to make a decision about this. It's time to make a change. This could also be an energy of shifting something in the family tree or the family history that applies to you personally. So family matters tend to be bigger when we have a Mercury retrograde in Cancer, especially while the Sun is also moving through Cancer as well. Now, over the course of this Mercury retrograde, we have only a few exact transiting aspects that are happening. And this means that retrograde Mercury is on his own. And so you might find that you are in more of your own emotional space, that you require more privacy or alone time to go into anything that is coming up to process and understand. This Mercury retrograde in Cancer is inviting you into your own personal world to do any emotional work that maybe you've been postponing, procrastinating on, or perhaps have been uncertain around how to approach. This is going to be very supportive for whatever you feel and need emotionally that is personal for you. And in fact, this could be a span of time that people feel committed to making a change in their life because of what they're understanding that no longer works, that is no longer in alignment with their needs and their personal belief systems. Now, the Cancer energy relates directly to how we emotionally connect with others, including how we trust other people, our discernment, our openness, our vulnerability. All of those energies could feel quite big during this particular Mercury retrograde. It's also going to bring up your attachment style, because a healthy, secure attachment style is that Cancer energy of feeling strong in your own internal world. You can handle what you're feeling, you can handle all energies, and you understand that you alone are responsible for them without going into any excessive neediness, codependency, merging, or anxious attachment. This can also relate, of course, to avoidant attachment, whether that is avoidant dismissive or avoidant fearful. This is basically returning us to unconscious energies and information we've been operating off of based on our initial experiences of a caregiver, of a parent, whether that was maternal or paternal, whomever was influential in helping you feel secure in trusting yourself and trusting your needs, or not trusting yourself and trusting your needs. That is what's going to come up for many people. Of course, this is a huge topic, attachment styles, and this is an energy that's important to explore. And in fact, it probably will come alive for you during this particular Mercury retrograde in Cancer, because this is where we are learning to do something different. We're learning that our emotional world matters. Your needs are important. What you feel is significant. And oftentimes we don't receive those messages or validation when we're younger, but as an adult, it's up to you to give those messages to yourself. And so this is going to be a time when we see that, perhaps more consciously and intentionally. You might also feel how much you've changed if you've already been working on these themes in your life. If you are curious about this energy and learning more about yourself, there are many great experts who talk about the 4 attachment styles, how it affects your nervous system, the influence it's had on you throughout your life, etc., etc. One expert I recommend is Dr. Nicole LaPera. She has a book called Reparenting the Inner Child, as well as a book called How to Do the Work. You can find her on Instagram as the holistic psychologist with over 9 million followers. She's just one of many experts, but it's important to know that this information is readily available from those who have professional understanding of these energies. Another Cancer theme is how you feel supported, because that Cancer energy will give to others very readily. Cancer can be quite accommodating, caring, heartfelt, and kind. But if the energy is not reciprocated in some form, if it's always giving, 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 and you're never receiving, then you feel depleted. But it's also where that Cancer energy can feel resentment, alone, and unsupported in the ways that it needs. And this could be a Mercury retrograde where you're seeing some new patterns in your life or understanding something at a new level of your being that you now require change in. Cancer energy is also a cardinal water sign. It's the first water sign in the zodiac, and every cardinal sign is where there is an initiation that occurs. And so this is an initiation threshold into understanding what needs to change within you so that you can show up with greater trust in yourself and your needs, as well as receiving support from those who can equally give back to you. This is how you fill up someone's cup, and then you need them to fill up yours. And that is part of the healthy dynamic in Cancer. Because think about where you may have been over giving, over providing, overdoing. After you notice that in a dynamic or relationship, how did you feel? Because that could be a Cancer feeling of sensing this is not an equal exchange. This doesn't feel good. I don't feel like I'm being seen. It's not reciprocal. Or perhaps you feel taken for granted. Whatever those feelings are teachers. Those feelings are giving you wisdom into what doesn't work for you anymore and guiding you to stand stronger in what you need and to be ready to express it. Now, this can feel very vulnerable when it's new, when you're doing something for the first time or communicating something in a whole new way. It can feel a little messy. You might have a lack of confidence or some doubts creeping in. And that Mercury in Cancer is going to be feeling all that. Mercury is not known for being strong in Cancer because it's more of the watery, flowing, open domains where this Mercury is trying to swim but can't move fast enough, doesn't have like that full coordination for the water signs. And so it could feel like you're grasping for the right words, you're trying to get it right. Like there could be a strong mental pressure here. But what Mercury in Cancer wants you to do is sink in to just trusting yourself and letting the thoughts and words flow through you, especially from the heart. And so there could be something that feels like it's overflowing. Like I'm getting the visual of a cup overfloweth if you've been holding back or holding in what you need to say, write, or put out there in some manner. And this is going to be a Mercury retrograde to slow down, moderate that energy for yourself, and trust that however you speak or say something, it's right for the moment. And that's also important because when Mercury is in Cancer, Cancer is ruled by the moon, and that moon is always ebbing and flowing through the 12 astrology signs. The moon spends about 2.5 days to 3 days in one sign. And so the energy is going to fluctuate. It could feel easier to state something when the moon is in an air sign or in a grounded earth sign. You might have more clarity. But when the moon is in a water sign or in a fire sign, it could feel like there's a lot more emotion in play and that there's a lot more even urgency that you could be sensing and feeling. So essentially, this could be a Mercury retrograde where we get out of our heads, we stop overthinking, overprocessing, over planning, and instead step into the flowing moment of what you're feeling and allowing that to guide you forward. And so it's more of a receptive energy. And depending on your natal chart, that could feel easy, that could feel more effortless, or it could feel like a struggle. It depends on how you connect with the Cancer energies and the water signs. Now, this can also bring about heightened intuition as you're feeling and sensing more that needs to be moved from the mind out or from the heart out. So do stay aware of how you're feeling the energy, and you might even need some kind of release valve if the energy feels like it's building up and it's almost like the water is collecting behind the dam. Then you want a responsible outlet for all of that energy, especially so you don't feel flooded. It doesn't take you over or sink you either. Now, during this Mercury retrograde until July 23rd, as Mercury moves from 26 degrees of Cancer back to 16 degrees of Cancer, Mercury is going to be conjunct the Sun on July 12th at 20 degrees of Cancer. We call this the Cazimi. This is where Mercury enters into the heart of the Sun. But with this particular conjunction, Mercury can feel that it is overwhelmed by an emotional message or a big feeling. So this would be a big feeling day, and it would also be important to trust what your energy needs in terms of self-care, nourishment, and personal space. Now, after this conjunction, Mercury retrograde is going to be a part of the Cancer new moon, which occurs on July 14th at 21, almost 22 degrees of Cancer. Mercury is still going to be within conjunction of this new moon in Cancer. And so it's going to highlight how far you've come, what you've been understanding, and perhaps reconfiguring in your own emotional world. And this will also be a benchmark for some type of new start, a new beginning that supports this Mercury retrograde in understanding whatever it is you've been moving through and even filtering out. Now, then Mercury continues retrograde, and in the second half of July, Mercury is going to be in an ongoing square to Saturn in Aries at 14 degrees. This Saturn is ultimately going to station retrograde at 14 degrees of Aries on July 26th. So that Saturn is moving very slowly, preparing to station retrograde, and is then meeting up with this Mercury also retrograde in Cancer. Now, they don't have an exact square, but when they're within, especially 5 degrees of each other, the influence is felt. And so there's going to be some messages coming through that Saturn in Aries is going to dominate. It is the stronger influence. It is a slower moving influence. And this Saturn in Aries is where you have been gaining new independence and courage for a new chapter in your life. As you'll recall, we had that significant conjunction between Saturn and Neptune back in February at 0 degrees of Aries. Then we had a strong lineup of energies in April that were all in Aries, signaling a new beginning is here and coming through. And as Saturn stations retrograde, there is a standing still energy of what needs to now align and change for the new starts. And Saturn is going to be going retrograde until the middle of December, traveling back to 7 degrees, 56 minutes of Aries. And so this is important because there are new beginnings and new chapters of your life that you're already aware of. You've been working on them. Saturn requires the work. Saturn requires the boundaries. And as this Mercury is in a long-term, about a 3-week square to Saturn in Aries, you're going to see what from the past cannot go forward. Any matters, developments, events, connections, relationships from the past that are not aligned with your new future trajectory are going to be made evident to you through emotional discomfort. There's going to be a sense that this doesn't fit in my new chapter, in my new direction, my new project. This isn't aligned with the beginnings that 2026 is moving me towards and that I'm actively creating. Mercury is even going to perhaps feel a sadness, melancholy, and loss around whatever you have to say goodbye to in order for this new chapter to unfold. And this could be something related to daily tasks, priorities, work endeavors, old routines, previous priorities. Keep in mind that Mercury also directly relates to business, trade, negotiation, commerce. It's the energy of communications in all forms of our lives. And you might sense that there's things you have to move away from in order to move more fully towards the next endeavor. And so again, this can bring up a discomfort, hard goodbyes, or transitions that just have something a little bit uncomfortable within them. But the universe is saying it's time. It's time to let the past go. It's time to be complete with what was. It's time to release what is no longer going to fit for you going forward, especially the second half of this year and beyond. And so this is also where emotions can come up. I'm thinking too of how this energy is in Cancer. And if something has to change in your home, in your family, in where you live, I'm seeing the picture of a mailbox, your address changes or your daily commute changes. That is going to be made evident here, especially the second half of July into August, where this Mercury has an ongoing square to Saturn in Aries. And it's interesting because even though you sense and know this is the right change or a needed change, there can still be sadness around that. Have you ever felt that when something is new and exciting and you're in it and you want this to develop and build, which is Saturn and Aries, and then a part of you also feels sad around what you have to grieve, release, and leave behind? And so those two feelings or those simultaneous energies can coexist, but they're uncomfortable and they can be confusing because they bring up doubt, right? They bring up that sense of, is this the right decision? Should I make this choice? Is this truly what I want? And that is also going to be a theme here in the second half of July. But the new energies of this year have been signaling to you it's time for a change. It's time for a new start, next endeavor, new development. And so you could be surprised at maybe some emotions that come up to process and move through, while at the same time knowing this is exactly what is needed. This is exactly what I want to choose. And at the same time, I feel a little bit sad about it too. And so that is emotional maturity, right? To recognize that you can have two emotions that feel competing, but really they're just coexisting. They're just self-honoring. They're honoring that you can feel multiple ways about changes or things happening in your life, and it's not always clear and clean. This is a Mercury retrograde of purging and filtering out the old so that you can be ready for more of what 2026 is bringing your way and more of what you are creating, actively creating with solid intention. Now, keep in mind, we will be discussing these energies more in the Wednesday weekly podcast, especially as we move through the second half of July and this square between Saturn and Aries and Mercury retrograde in Cancer is being felt. You could also feel that there is a welcomed relief, that you can let go of the past. You can release old baggage, that you feel lighter as well because of what you're being required to release as well as newly choose. Now, another visual I was getting around this particular Mercury retrograde is related to the caduceus that Mercury is known for holding, especially the Roman god Mercury, because the caduceus was frequently used to symbolize quicksilver, which is Mercury, quick on his feet, quick moving, an energy of alchemy and transformation. The caduceus is a winged staff that has two snakes entwined around it. And here in modern day life, we actually associate this with medicine, physicians, doctors, and healing. But before it was known for symbolizing those energies, it was associated with Mercury and essentially the medicine or information he was delivering as the messenger. The two snakes have been interpreted in a few ways, one being alchemy and transformation, another in mythology of Mercury using the wand to stop the snakes from fighting, symbolizing peace through negotiation. And so I was getting the visual, the very strong visual of Mercury and Cancer working with the caduceus. And it's interesting because Mercury is swimming through Cancer, so he'd be swimming with this winged staff. But it feels like there's something in our emotional bodies that are being cleansed and purged with the healing medicine that has been delayed, that something maybe has felt postponed. And this Mercury retrograde is offering a deeper emotional cleanse that might even be felt through the physical body, whether that is an emotional release or purging of some kind, especially from matters of the past. And so this Mercury may be inviting you to fully cleanse and release anything you've been unconsciously holding that relates to your emotional body, your feelings, your internal world, and to give yourself that room and space to let it out, move through it, release it, and that it's actually a deeper energy cleanse that sets you free and allows you to swim faster or to move ahead with greater clarity and certainty. So I know that's a very odd visual, but there's something about how water and even the fluids in our body are being encouraged to become healthier, especially as a part of that reprogramming that every Mercury retrograde invites. This could also be a time when you have some very emotional healing conversations that you're invited to understand something from a more empowered viewpoint that you missed the first time, that part of what you're reframing in a story or narrative supports continuing to trust yourself and trust your feelings, especially from that mature, responsible place in yourself. Now, as Mercury stations retrograde on June 29th, pay attention to any big messages that are coming through to get your attention, to be received and heard. That's always important every time Mercury stations. Then also in July, on July 23rd, listen to what you're feeling and hearing at that time as this Mercury stations direct at 16 degrees of Cancer. And so, as I said, we will keep discussing these energies in the Wednesday podcast episode as we move into July. But I hope this gives you a good heads up into some of the themes and energies that we will be learning from, that we'll be understanding and revisiting during this particular Mercury retrograde in Cancer. As always, thank you so much for joining me for today's episode. I'll be back every Wednesday and Monday for a new podcast episode, and wishing you a beautiful day ahead, as well as a very beautiful healing Mercury retrograde in Cancer. Take good care, and I'll see you back here soon.